Welcome to Third and Fairfax, the official podcast of the Writers Guild of America West. I'm your host, Brian Gary. In this episode, host Jonterri Gadson talks with Everybody Still Hates Chris developer-showrunner Sanjay Shah about how he got the Comedy Central animated series WGA-covered, the creative challenges of live action versus animation, his best tips for selling your pitch, and much more. Listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, or Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. And now, here's Jonterri.
Welcome back to Third and Fairfax. I'm Jonterri Gadson, and today I'm joined by the showrunner of Everybody Still Hates Chris, Sanjay Shah. Hello, Sanjay.
Hey, Jonterri. How's it going?
Great. So I'm excited to have you here to talk about Everybody Still Hates Chris, how it came to be. Full disclosure, I got the chance to be a writer on the show. Thank you so much. And it was a great experience, so I'm excited for you to just tell everybody how it happened. How did you come to create the show and get it on air?
I met Chris Rock during the pandemic. I was working on I had just co-run Central Park, which was like a massive animated show with Halstead Sullivan. We were paper teamed, and I had a great experience working with him on that. And I took off to work on a Pixar project. It was my second one there. And it was a chance to work with Pete Docter and Mike Jones on one of their first series, which is coming out soon, called Dream Productions. It takes place inside the Inside Out universe.
Oh, wow.
In the, factory in your brain where they make dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was working on that when 3 Arts reached out to my agent because they helped produce the original Everybody Hates Chris. And they heard that I was done with Central Park, and they were meeting with people to potentially, meet with Chris about rebooting Everybody Hates Chris as an animated show. They had that idea because I guess there were attempts to reboot it in the past over several years. And the live action versions of the idea, I think there was some reluctance on Chris's part to depart from the age range in which the kids were, because his worry was once he starts on the road to becoming a stand-up, he's no longer an everyman, which I think was legit. And so I guess that's kind of how they got to, well, maybe if we do it animated, we can, solve that problem. So they were meeting with people who had experience in running animated shows. And, I was a Chris Rock fan. I got into this business through stand-up. I was doing stand-up in the early 2000s. And I started doing stand-up because I saw Bring the Pain, and I was really inspired by Bring the Pain. I'd always been a fan of stand-ups. Like, I used to take the bus to go see stand-ups when I was in junior high school. All the dads in our neighborhood had comedy albums because it was just the end of the 80s, 90s comedy boom. And so, but Chris Rock's Bring the Pain was the first time I was like, if I could ever do something like that, I want to do this. And so I started doing stand-up, and, I was making money at it. I was running a room at the Melrose Improv just down the street here. And anyway, that's a different story, but I got into TV writing kind of that way. So, when the opportunity came up to meet with Chris Rock to reboot a show, of course, I said no, absolutely not. Because, well, don't meet your heroes, but also I just wasn't interested in doing a reboot,
Oh, right, yeah.
And I just thought, like, this show is so beloved, and it would be so hard to, do something great, or at least something that I would be proud of to put my name on, let alone Chris would be proud of to put his name on. And I just didn't really want to do a reboot, But when they said, well, no, we want to do it animated, that's when I thought, okay, well, that could be interesting. And so I, took the meeting with 3 Arts and kind of expressed how I would approach it. And so then, I got sent along to Chris, and it was, bake off. Like, a bunch of people probably met with him. But, we hit it off right away because we both knew some people in common in the stand-up world, and people who could vouch for me. And I knew his work, and it was clear. I mean, by the time I'd gotten to be a co-EP at Fresh Off the Boat, I worked at Fresh Off the Boat for 4 seasons. I mean, I wrote an episode. This is before any of this happened. I
Mhm.
wrote an episode of Fresh Off the Boat called Bring the Pain,
Wow. Yeah.
about Eddie Wong, his character, seeing Bring the Pain,
Wow.
and how, he was cut out of the conversation because he didn't get to see it that same weekend as all the other kids and whatever. It was just a C story.
Mhm.
But that's how much I loved this special. And so, I think that he understood that I knew his body of work.
Mhm.
See before, I mean, back to SNL and even
Right.
before that, Crush Groove and everything. I knew his work, and I was a stand-up,
Mhm.
and I knew the show.
Yeah.
I had seen the show when it first ran,
Mhm.
and prior to the meeting, I rewatched all 88 episodes with, now being a parent with my son to get a different perspective on
I
it.
love
Also
that.
to, just study for the interview.
Mhm.
But it did give me the perspective of watching it as a parent. Like the first time I saw the show, it was really seeing myself in young Chris. And then, I got to watch it with my kid and see the show a little bit more through the parents' point of view, Julius and
Oh.
Rochelle.
Yeah.
And so I shared a little bit of what that experience was like with him. But I think what really, clinched the job for me was I told him the way that I would come into the show. And I said, you failed, I mean, this is a spoiler, but, the original show ended with this kind of homage to the ending of The Sopranos, where Chris is about to learn the results of his GED score test, and it cuts to black before we find out. And the
Mhm.
presumption is, well, he passed, and then he gets to drop out of high school and go on to becoming Chris Rock we know today. And I knew from a fan perspective that there was a lot of discussion about what happened.
Yeah.
And was that number on Julius's delivery truck his GED score or not? I don't think 735 is a possible GED score. But I knew how much the fandom cared about that.
Mhm.
And so I said to Chris, we'll start the show seconds after the finale ended, and we'll find out you failed.
Mhm.
And you end up back in high school, and then as a result of one, and you failed because not because you actually failed a test, but because you grabbed one of your cheap dad's pencil, number 3 pencils, without realizing it was a number 3 pencil he bought on sale, and you didn't use a number 2, and that's why you failed. And so, and then you end up in an animated show, and then it wasn't until we gathered as a group of writers
Mhm.
that we came up with a variety of ways to come into justify how we came into animation. And to Chris's credit, like with him, it's always the funniest joke wins, just like it is with me.
Mhm.
And I wanted to do whatever he was comfortable with in terms of making that joke.
Mhm.
And we presented him 3 different great options, and he went with the funniest one.
Nice.
But yeah, it was Meredith Dawson, I think, who pitched the joke that ended up in the show. And I'm so happy that it did, because it's one of the most talked about things about
Yeah.
the pilot. And I'm really happy that, Chris and I shared a vision about doing a continuation. So it's a reboot in the sense that it's animated now. And so you do have to rethink, reimagine, but it's not a traditional reboot by
Right.
any means. And it has this component that makes it a continuation of the show as well,
Mhm.
which was very important to me from a fan perspective. And so that's kind of how in that one meeting, I got the job in the room. At the end of the meeting, Chris said, I want to
wow.
work with you. And so it was off to the races after that.
And how long was it from that meeting until, I guess, when it aired?
100 years. I mean, it was so long. So I met him in the pandemic. I got
Right.
the
Oh,
job, and
yeah.
that was 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then, it was like BA takes forever during this
Mhm.
time because there's so many shows, and it took forever to get everyone's
Mhm.
deals worked out. And, it's an A-list star. So
Yeah.
like his deal's super complicated. And, I had 2 other things in development at the time, so that made things a little bit complicated. And then he's off on tour,
Oh,
and so
right,
that
yeah.
added to the complications. And, and then it was like trying to wrangle, cast members,
Mhm.
because our instinct was we wanted as many of the original cast members back,
Mhm.
either playing their original roles or another role. So we reached out to everyone, and, figuring all of that out took a long time. And then, of course, then it took a while to hire everybody, and then, took a while to get WGA status, and which we did, which I'm really happy about. And then, of course, we had a strike.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we had a strike.
That added some time.
So that added some time. And what I'm really happy about was we were very strategic with, planning for a potentially long strike. I got my first job at King of the Hill through word of mouth among stand-up comics. I found out that there might be a job opening there. But as soon as I got my first job, within a year we were on strike. This was the 07-08 strike, which was a long strike. So, I'd been broke for so long and I was starting to make money. And then now we're on strike. But, you remember in the room, this is why I was beating the drum of like, hey, everyone, please prepare for this. Save your money.
Yes.
This could potentially go. I am hearing rumblings. This could potentially be a long strike. And I'm glad now that I had that opportunity to prepare not only our crew, but to position the show in such a way that they would essentially be forced to bring everyone back, writers, production, everyone, which is exactly what happened. Within 3 days of the strike ending, everyone was hired back, and we continued with the show. And that took some strategy, and I'm glad it all worked out.
Yeah, me too. And thank you for that. So let's talk about, how did you end up getting the show WGA covered? Because that's like a big talking point now, and it's a thing that we're in the fight with in trying to make that just standard.
Yeah, and I just want to start with a caveat. I'm a member of IATSE too. I'm a proud IATSE member of the Animation Guild. It just we've made some inroads on the WGA side. The reason why it was never just a question that this had to be a WGA covered animated show was that I know nothing else.
Right.
I mean, I worked at King of the Hill as my first job, and
but that went for how many seasons were you?
13. Well, I mean, the show went for 13 seasons, but I worked there for the last 3.
Yeah.
And, I saw what that meant to have a WGA covered show and have it still be a show that is successful and makes the studio a ton of money, I still get really nice residual checks from King of the Hill.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Better than hit shows like I've been on, like Fresh Off the Boat, which are more recent deals. Right? And so that was another reason I was really, adamant about it. But I know nothing else. And also just, I believe all the talking points that the Guild says. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've worked on IATSE shows as well. And look, when it's a question of, you are part of a family, whether you're part of a family or not, or you have people depending on you, and you need healthcare coverage, you would like to get paid a proper fee for your script. You would like residuals. You want to be in a job that's stable, that's respected, that, more likely will have marketing money put behind it. That's what WGA coverage signals, right?
Nice.
It also signals to me the potential of a better collaborative relationship with your studio and network, which makes everyone money. Okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
When everyone is motivated, invested, and working together, then you have a chance for success that is going to fill everyone's bag, right? King of the Hill, The Simpsons, Family Guy, Futurama, American Dad. These are billion-dollar properties, Bob's, right?
Yeah.
And that makes everyone money. So I don't know. I'm in it for the money too, just like the studio, as much as I am in it to write jokes and the creative stuff, which is what keeps me in it. It's what is my passion. But, I'm also trying to, support a family and retire without having to, worry.
Yeah.
And so that's why WGA was important. So from the very beginning, I said this has to be a WGA covered show from the very beginning. And I also, knew that, look, I was, 15 or 16 years in as a writer at that point. And all of my financial advice comes from stand-ups, which is basically boils down to save your money, keep your living expenses, keep your nuts small, live like you're in college. That really was ingrained in me because I was, basically just a stand-up doing part-time jobs to float myself for several years before I broke in as a TV writer. And so I had, the leverage you can give yourself is being a saver, so that you don't have to say yes to everything, and so that you can push. And so I pushed for WGA coverage, and they, at the last minute, the deal was pregnant, things ready to go. And at the last minute, they tried to switch it to Animation Guilds. because they had some other shows that were animation guilds. But what I did my homework, my due diligence, whatever, and I discovered that, well, at least one of their shows was WGA-covered, Tuning in the News.
Oh, yeah.
Right, which is Stephen Colbert's show. And I just thought, all right, well, I mean, if you're going to do it for Stephen Colbert, probably want to do it for Chris Rock, right?
Yeah.
And, I shared the same thing with Chris Rock. And, I mentioned this to Chris on a Friday, and by Monday we were WGA-covered.
Oh, wow.
And so, the thing is, I want people to feed themselves, right? And so you have to make decisions to survive sometimes. I get that. But know what your points of leverage are, you know? And I had the huge gift of Chris Rock. Who cares. He wants people to get paid right. He also, he wants, his legacy is important to him. And I think he knows that if you have a WGA covered show, you're going to have more stable writing team. And you're going to draw writers who, are going to work really hard because they know all the benefits of a WGA covered show. So they're going to work really hard to make sure the show is great. It's ultimately a selfish decision that in which everyone, including the studio network, wins.
Nice. So what other advice might you have for like other adult animation writers who are looking to secure a WGA project and maybe don't have a Chris Rock on their side?
Yeah. Again, like know what your leverage is. Know what you are willing to do to negotiate it. Understand your budget, right? And so understand your numbers. And if that's hard for you, if that's not like something you're comfortable with, work with a really good accountant or line producer or both to really figure out how this could be affordable.
Oh, nice.
For the studio. This is where it really helps to have animation experience or someone with a lot of animation experience who understands the pipeline and where your different points of potential cost savings could be.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I've been working now for almost 20 years on and off in both live action and animation. And I knew from the start that this is kind of the path I wanted to go down. And so I made sure on every show that I was trying to learn, like, okay, what does the pipeline here look like? Why is this 5 weeks, to complete here, but at this other show, it was 2 weeks?
Yeah.
And asking those questions, right? And understanding what your weekly burn rate is and, what overage is acceptable, what isn't, how you can, how you can complete a show at or under budget, and asking the right questions. And I had the benefit of working with people who are really good at this, Bill Lawrence and, Nanashka Khan and these people who you can ask these questions, because ultimately, what do people want? I mean, we're all in it for creative reasons and we love things, but ultimately the show has to cost less than what it's bringing in. We all know that. So be an expert on that so you can speak that language and make it hard for them to say no.
Nice.
Sell that you are going to save money doing it this way.
Yeah.
And be able to make that argument legitimately.
Nice. Yeah. And I think something I learned being like, to your credit, I think the thing that was the best about being in your room and that I was excited about just from day one after, getting the offer was that you wanted the writers to stay on through production, which is why our deals were like for 52, like for a year to write on a show. And I was like, this is a dream, like changing my life.
Right.
But, and what I learned though, because everybody thinks, I know I had this misconception that writing in animation means you can just do whatever you want. And very quickly learned that it's like, okay, if you just want to, it's good because you can just have a location that you want to be and you can just have all of these different locations. But I remember that was one of the earliest lessons I think that you imparted was like, well, no, also the animators were like, no,
right.
Like they have to draw all of these backgrounds.
Right.
And they just like, we want to reuse sets. They want to reuse these backgrounds.
That's right.
And there's somebody else to do it. Can you talk about some of the ways that, live action differs from animation in that way and like how that worked to your benefit?
Yeah. I mean, aside from some of the obvious differences, like if you want, the Earth to blow up or, run into the moon or something, you can do that in animation a lot easier than you could do in live action. There's some obvious things, right? You have non-human characters talk very easily. stuff that you do in special effects and live action so much easier to do in animation. But, I really approach it as if they're the same thing. My assumption is everything costs somebody's time, which costs money, right? And so if I have, 3 board teams, storyboard artists, or teams of storyboard artists, those are resources. If I have X number of background artists, that's a resource. That's a finite resource. And even with the, implementation of AI, which we're all concerned about, it's still going to come down to somebody's time fixing what broken ass AI is going to do until quantum computing just, takes over the world and makes it, just like a Terminator situation. But, so yeah, I wanted from the first week to put my producer hat on with everyone. Bill Lawrence really drilled this thought into me, which is treat every writer as if you are, the non-producer level writers as if you're training them to become producers, and give the producer level writers more training in things that they don't have, because you want everyone to eventually be like a 5-tool player, because that just benefits the show, makes the show stronger. But then there's so many things that need to happen, whether it's live action or animation, that you can start sending people, so that your time isn't, split in a million different ways, which damages the show.
Yeah.
Right. And so I knew that I wanted everybody to be involved in decisions about art, in thinking as they're writing with producer hats on. So yeah, we can't have a million backgrounds. We can't have 100 people in every scene.
Yeah.
That's why it's special when we go see a feature-length animated movie. That's why it was such a big deal in the Simpsons movie that you saw almost every character in one frame. Like, that's why that was a big deal, because it is so hard to do, and so costly to do. Action sequences that cost money, being able to do like a 360-degree camera move, that's time and money. I mean, you can do it, but it takes time and money. And so justify it. And I love that it gives us a restriction, because having too much choice, we all know, is a problem we're experiencing in all areas of our lives, right? So having these sort of, guidelines is good for us, right?
It forces creativity.
It forces creativity. And so if you're going to do a 360-degree camera move, why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing it? Just because it's cool, or because it's adding to the narrative, in a particular way? Is it funny in this moment, right? It has to be justified for the time and money that we're going to, spend on it. And so I really wanted everyone to be aware of that, we can't have, 100 people in this scene, you know? And also, I just had the experience of working on, an animated show for Apple, who were willing to spend a lot of money. And we got to do a lot of those big, gigantic scenes and really recreate Central Park. And even with, there wasn't a blank check, but it was a lot, a lot of money, because their entire budget for all their shows, like $1 billion of margining, just a tiny, tiny amount of money for them, right? Even then, it was so complex to do, and that was the best case scenario for a streaming show. So anyway,
and I think also with in live action, and the thing that a lot of lower level writers are facing now, and even upper level writers who are newer, is being able to get production experience. And so, I mean, I don't think that people realize that there's production experience involved in animation, and that's what I got to see. And and I think a lot of it parallels live action, like getting to give notes on the different edits, and getting to pick the music, and all of those meetings that we got to be in and be decision makers in. I think is very helpful. And also, I think a thing that people don't realize when they imagine, well, what is the reason that animation isn't covered often? And it's not that the scripts are any different. Our shows very much are a family show. It's got a family story. And so I don't see the scripts as being any different than a story that could be told in live action if you wanted to. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, and that's because I started at King of the Hill, which many people said could have been a live action show the way it was written, and I agree, And I approached this show similarly, especially since we were going from live action to animation, not wanting it to be too jarring. I wrote it as if it was live action
Mm-hmm.
with some, moments where animation is super justified in its
Yeah.
usage.
Yeah.
And the language of this particular show had a lot of flashbacks in the live action that felt like, those are animated sequences anyway. They could have very well been animated sequences. But I don't see a difference. Now, I think the reason why it is viewed differently is somewhat steeped in like animation's history since Disney, right?
Oh,
Where
right.
a lot of things were kind of board artist driven or director driven, and writers were brought in as sort of like the assist for what is a director or a board artist's vision. Phineas and Ferb is a good example of that. I love that show, and that's really driven by artists, and writers are there to help, right? But and I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that process, but that's what from the outside it looks like, and a lot of what is called kids animation is done this way, and so and a lot of feature animation is done this way. Pixar's done that way. It's a
Oh, good to
director's
know.
medium, and writers are sort of there to assist the director. So I've been in their brain trust meetings, and I've seen, I've had two experiences of it. I worked on a feature there, and I was very much not part of the brain trust. It was just the directors hanging out. By the way, it's just their fancy word for a writer's room. Like, come on. But then I got to work on a series where we were very much a part of the brain trust and vocal, and got to meet with all these heavyweights at Pixar, and pressure test ideas and pitch with them, and but it's a director's medium, right? And so what TV, one reason I was drawn to TV from when I was a stand-up was, writers are the boss here, and you can really have a lot of say in the vision of your show. And so it was just natural when animation started getting covered by Writers Guild that that would be the case, and so I think some of the two experiences just sort of because of what happened historically, and I think legitimate, I think it's legit, like great movies and shows come out of both models.
Yeah.
But the ideal model, which I really try to encourage at this show, which I think Pixar does a little bit of, but not to the extent that we were trying to do it, is really trying to create a dialogue between writer, director, and artists. Because board artists, directors will see stuff visually that we just, in our writer brain, sometimes we don't see. Background gags or expressions or stuff that they can do artistically that we might not catch. Like, why wouldn't we want that in the show, And then vice versa, writers can bring things that artists might not see. And, my experience with animation up until this point had really been, there's sort of a divide between the two. And that never sat well with me.
Yeah.
And it also just felt stupid.
Yeah.
And so we really tried hard to just keep that kind of collaborative atmosphere open, A good idea can come from anywhere, and I think the original show operated on that principle too. Ali Leroy and Chris really have that, had that idea, I think, with the original show, which is one of the reasons I think it was so beloved.
Yeah.
And we tried to do that on our show, including folks in production for Best Idea Wins.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the good idea comes from everywhere thing. I think that contributed also to the way the writer's room that you put together felt so like safe and nurturing. And so I wonder if you might talk about that, because that's also a concern that, a lot of us have as writers, and especially like, lower level writers, is going into rooms where we don't often, know, every room is different, and you don't know what you're allowed to do, how much you're allowed to participate, and so, but it didn't feel that way in your room, and I know that was intentional for you. So can you talk about how, like, you went about forming the room and creating it as a safe place?
I was really intentional when I set out to run this room, because, it was so many years in and have had a lot of different experiences. And I was trying to pull from, that Venn diagram of like place I liked working, hit show.
Yeah.
Right. And
Nice.
how, like, what fell in the middle. And there were a couple shows that fell in the middle for me. And I really modeled a lot of my show running after shows like this and showrunners like this, because it proved to me you can make a hit show that gets syndicated where everyone continues to be paid and be able to sleep at night, get the best work out of people. And again, like, it's not, it's not like to be woo-woo or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's ultimately selfish. Just from a management perspective, right? I, Sanjay, can get the best out of people when people are happy to come to work.
Yeah.
And other showrunners that I've worked with or heard stuff about, they might get the best out of like creating healthy or unhealthy conflict in the room, and there's both. Creating a competitive environment, putting in long hours versus short hours, everybody has their thing with the way that they work. But the way that I like to work is, I want, people, this is not my original thought. This came from, one of the things I love about what we do and the craft of it, why it's important to me is, things get passed down. And, Phil Rosenthal had this idea in his room, like, I want people to have lives outside of work. I want them to go home and get in an argument with your partner, go to the PTA meeting, like go try to buy a car, and haggle, and then come into the room tomorrow and talk about it. And those turn into stories for Everybody Loves Raymond, right? And one of my great mentors, Mike Royce, I got to work with him on 2 shows, and he brought that idea into the shows that, I worked on with him. And I loved that, and so I brought that into this show. I wanted normal hours so people had lives. I mean, if there was work to do, we stayed and did it.
Yeah.
Right. But the other thing is, like, there was very little fuck around time. Right.
Yeah. But it was still fun.
It was doing,
but less fuck around.
Having fun within the context of what we're doing. And that's like, I learned that on a couple other shows, and that to me, like, giving people time, I felt like made them work harder, knowing like, okay, we're here. We're gonna, do this stuff. We're gonna fuck around a little bit, but we're gonna try as much as possible to get done. We all want to have lives, and then stuff would happen to people, and they're bringing that stuff into the room, and then it makes it into the show. Yeah. So that, I think, was really good, especially because we had a show that has Chris Rock doing voiceover, talking from the present day within a show that is a period piece in 1987, and so I needed people talking about what's going on in their lives in order to really. I hired for that. I hired for that. People from different walks of life and age groups and everything. I want to hear all of that, especially for our family show, which part of the sell was modern day Chris is going to talk about the things that parallel today with 1987. And so I needed that. And also, again, it's so draining when you have nonsense going on your show, and there's already, having worked on a first season animated show before and a lot of first season live action shows, there's just too much that can go wrong anyway. Right. And so there's the last thing I wanted to do is deal with like the drama that I actually had a little bit of control over as much as possible. And so I wanted to minimize that because it was hard enough to just get everything else to line up. And first season shows, animated shows, really hard. And so...
Well, what makes it really hard?
It's quality control, pressure testing. I mean, looking at designs, walk cycles, backgrounds, all the assets are being designed for the first time.
Right, yeah.
And you have way more episodes in play simultaneously than I've ever experienced in live action, right? And so you saw, when things really started cooking, I mean, sometimes we would have between 4 and 8 episodes in different stages of production in play simultaneously. You need to voice direct this. You need to look at a cut of that. Yeah. Now there's designs coming in for this. This needs a rewrite. We need to break this new story. Yeah. And so all of this stuff is happening in tandem. And we knew that a strike was coming, right? Yeah. And so, I wanted to make sure everybody got a script fee, and, I just wanted to make sure that we had something to show for before the strike happened, that, if they canceled our show or it was too expensive, that we could at least have a first season of the show before somewhat in production and have it, in place so that they would have a reason to bring us back, to complete the show. But we worked really hard and, and that came to be, but it makes it really hard. So I just thought, okay, I don't want to deal with drama. I don't have the energy for it. I'm older. I have a teenager. Like the last thing I want to do is deal with like that kind of shit at work. And, as I was really quick to let people go who were going to create a bad environment. And so very early on in the process, we had someone on the production side that was really nice around me, but was not very nice to people when I wasn't there, and gave one chance, and it happened again, and this person was gone and replaced. And that, I had no qualms about it. I slept well at night, because the larger mission is, that everybody is coming to a place where they can do their best work without interference, because then we all look good and we all make money, and we have potentially a show to come back to.
Yeah.
So again, it's ultimately selfish, right? I wanted the best show. I was hired to make the best show. It would have ruined me mentally if I failed at the show, but if I failed Chris giving me this opportunity, to revisit this part of his legacy and do a bad job, someone who inspired me to do stand-up. And so my motivation was, what's going to give me the best show?
Nice. And I also think, to your credit, because and I felt this way too when I used to be like a professor, is like nobody was really teaching us how to manage a classroom. And the same way I feel about with showrunners, like, yes, there's the showrunner training program, but like not having the management experience, like not having actual management training. And I think a lot of people, like, having to have the confrontations with people in order to give them the feedback that's necessary, like you said, giving a chance. And so, to your credit, I think that you did a good job, like a great job, having those conversations and giving people a chance to do better. Where do you think that comes from, though? Like, because I know you did many things before you became...
I mean, I've had every job. Yeah. So, like, I've been working since I was 11. I was the last kid to have a paper route for the San Jose Mercury News before it was like the domain of, white guys with mullets, with Toyota pickup trucks, But I've had so many jobs, and, I managed restaurants, Burger King. I was a line cook in college, and honestly, it was my restaurant experience more than anything else, And in fact, when I hired our line producer, I met with a lot of different line producers, and I really connected with Alex. But the thing that, made her a winning candidate overall for me was she also had a lot of restaurant experience.
Oh, wow.
And I knew what that meant, and she'd managed, she'd been in the managerial situation in restaurants. And man, if you have survived that environment and worked in that environment, like, I think easy to work at, running a show. I mean, I've worked with, like, I had a pizza delivery guy who had a loaded shotgun in his trunk, and, it was just, was racist and, like, but really complicated, called like a black customer boy, but like really complicated to fire him, and I figured out a way. And it was like, you learn these things, right? To protect your people. And so it was just trial by fire with that kind of stuff. And I'm glad I had those experiences in retrospect, because it really prepared me for this situation. But yeah, I was really happy that Bill Lawrence put me in the showrunner training program. He was my sponsor, and, working on his show too, in particular, like, really put us all in situations that, like, for our level, I look back and I can't believe it used to just be the standard, but like, hey, go run that, department head meeting, come to editing with me. Our number one on the call sheet has a problem with this joke. You go take care of it.
Oh, wow.
And I was I think I was an ESE, maybe, and so being put in those positions, hey, why don't you and two people, go be a writer's pod and rewrite this scene together? All these little moments of management, helped in particular to translate some of that skill with, running a restaurant, to how it applies to, like, a writer's room. So I think that's where it came from.
Wow. I didn't know that. And it makes sense. And also, like, so talking about mentorship, I know that you do a lot of, like, work as a mentor, like working with Sundance. And then are you a part of, like, the showrunner training, like the running of it, or maybe you just pop in?
No, they've never asked me, but that's okay. No, I
heard it here first.
No, I work with Sundance and Rideback and Stowe. I've done stuff for Stowe. Pillars, which works with Muslim writers in particular. I've done a ton of these programs. When I have time, I do them. But I like to say it's not. It comes from there are a lot of people that help me for no good reason, and I think about that a lot. And how much that meant to me and how critical that was, especially coming from a college where there was no network here in Hollywood. And when I was coming up, there certainly weren't people a lot of Indians or South Asians who were doing this. And so I didn't have a route that way. And it was literally someone backstage at the Comedy Store after I had a good set and she had a good set. And she was like, your set was so good. And I was like, your set was so good, you know, and we were just complimenting each other's sets. And I was so broke. I was just like, how do I make money at this? Because I was still doing shows for free. And so she was like, oh, okay, well, you need to get on the college circuit. You could do this, you could do that with stand-up. But, you know, you should really think about TV writing. And I was like, what even is that? You know, like I knew theoretically people wrote television, but I didn't know anything about it. And it was just this chance meeting with Beth. God, I'm forgetting her last name. She wrote on Ellen. I'm so sorry, Beth. But yeah, it was because of Beth that I even knew like the basics. Okay, well, you write a sample, you make sure it's bulletproof, you get it in front of a rep. They hopefully get you a meeting. Like it was this chance meeting with this person, you know? And so then I spent the next couple of years writing samples. So anyway, those moments are really important to me. And, you know, not just for like, you know, being in my feelings about it, but it's something I like about the craft. I kind of like, you know, because I like the risk-taking aspect of this. It's one of the things that drew me to this. I like the lifestyle of it, you know? And so it's, you know, extending a hand back. But, you know, there's also a part that's like, it's ultimately selfish too. I was asking some of the other people I mentor with, like, why do we do this, you know? And so much of our lives as writers, we are asked to defend our choices. So much of our lives is spent defending our choices with whomever. And here we are in a situation where we walk in and the assumption is, oh, you know what you're talking about.
Right.
And we rarely get to feel
That's
that.
true.
And we rarely get to speak in that way. And in doing that, we're also learning something and honing our craft in a different way.
Nice.
I mean, the first time I prepared for like the first thing I did at Sundance was just take the group through like the one-line pitch I had for an episode all the way to completed episode.
Oh, wow.
And I was just given free rein with how I explain that. And it was the first time I really had to think about it, you know? And I'm glad because it was just prior to this show selling and taking off. And it really got me to think about, oh, wait, was that the best way to do it? And how could I have done this differently? And, we were able to get all, like the network and studio to combine their notes really early on. How were we able to do that? And so I was really benefiting from, you know, I forget what corporate people call it, but like looking back and like looking at best practices and revisiting and thinking, okay, process-wise, like what can I take from this? And so there's a benefit that way. There's also a benefit to, you know, someone told me early in my career, like don't stay at one show too long because you narrow your network, right? And so I always, by the third year on a show, which I know how it sounds, but like I've been writing 20 years, but like, you know, these shows used to go 3 seasons and continue going. But, you know, after 3 years, I would start getting like the itch to move on because I would get worried, like, okay, if I'm in one place. And so sometimes, you know, I would take a risk and leave, you know, and sometimes like shows that were hit shows and I would leave and feel like, what the fuck did I do? But, but you know, you got to keep so now I get some of that through this, right? I meet other writers this way who are my level because we're the mentors, but I'm also meeting this, you know, some of the programs are brand new writers breaking in. Some of them include mid-level writers, but this is how I get to know other people as well. And I feel like, okay, I am still part of this larger community and not just like a EP or co-EP or showrunner community. Because again, I really love the craft and, you know, I want to continue doing this thing that I love. And part of it is just keeping your network, expansive, you know? So it just checks a lot of boxes for me. You get a free lunch, you get people telling you you're great, you know?
But they're also helping.
Also helping. Yeah.
Okay. So the way that you were talking about, like, you had a lot of like chance things happen to you. So now it sounds like you're being more intentional with giving those opportunities that aren't just a chance, like you're hoping to.
Yeah. I tell people I'm giving you stuff that took me 10 years to figure out. And so when this works out for you, you're going to hire me.
Nice. Yeah.
In like a 2-day a week, like number 3 or 4 on the show, you know, I have 3-day weekends on both sides. But no, you know, I feel like a lot of the stuff is hard won information. And, you know, I want to protect what we do. I like that the TV model is writer run. Breaking Bad, you get like The Wire, like from this model, not from, you can get great shows from all of our friends and features coming into our playground and doing stuff like,
good point.
But our show, like Seinfeld, like these are billion-dollar shows, okay? My son is watching The Office. Why is he watching The Office? He watched all of Parks and Rec. Why is he? It's not his age group. They're watching it, He started watching this stuff when he was 11 or 12 years old. These are durable shows. Writers created these shows from a model that began with like Bob Hope and, and Lucille Ball. Like there's a reason why are we like stabbing the golden goose here? Like this is what creates money for everybody. Right. And so part of it for me is like wanting to preserve this thing. Again, because I love the craft and I love this uniquely American thing that we have created that other people from around the world come here to study. I know I've gotten the emails from the guild. Hey, so-and-so from France wants to come and sit in this room to understand best practices. I just met with the group from Australia, a bunch of writers who are trying really hard because they are treated so differently there. They don't even get to pitch their own shows.
Oh, wow.
The exec and the director go and pitch their shows for them. They're not even in the room often.
Wow. And then they're just assigned to write.
And they're assigned, and then once they finish the scripts, they don't often go to set at all. It's just like you're done. And they're really trying to adopt a lot of our practices, whereas the irony is, I think, over here, they're trying to do what Australia is doing to us, right?
Yeah.
And they love the Marvel model, and, it works out for Marvel. But, like, I love the shows that have – those shows raised me. Like, those shows are like –
absolutely.
I had seen every episode of Everybody Hates Chris before meeting on this show, right? And I love TV, and I love, the half-hour comedies that this system has created. So as much as I can contribute to preserving this and continue working in this way, I'm going to do whatever I can do to help that.
No, that's great. And I'm glad you're passing on your knowledge. So I wonder if you might share like some of your pitching techniques, because I've heard about you, like, selling things in the room, like getting a yes in the room. What do you think? Why do you think that's happening for you? Like, what are you doing?
I think one thing I emphasize to people, even if you are not a performer, is do stand-up or improv or whatever type of public speaking or whatever. I feel like stand-up and my experience in it and my love for stand-up since I was little has really helped me with my pitching, because I approach it as if it's stand-up.
Nice.
And I have that same anxiety if they're not laughing at a rate that is tonally in line with what I'm pitching. I have the instinct to worry about it. When I'm done with the pitch, I'm immediately pulling out my pages and checking and dotting the things that worked and didn't to rework it. And every single time I pitch it again, I'm improving on it, right? I never settle. I will reopen things I've already sold and rewrite the pitches, right?
Wow. Like a set, like it's your set.
Like it's a set, it's a set, and especially for a comedy, it is malpractice if your pitch is not funny or attempting to be funny, right? Yeah. And so funny first, The other thing is like understand what really is happening on the other side of the table. You want to pitch in a way that it is easy for the person who's taking notes on the other side of the table to summarize what your show is, why it's funny, who the characters are, what the premise is, in as pithy of a way possible. And there's tricks to doing this, right? And you literally can incept what they're going to write down as like the shorthand that they're going to, if their boss is not in the room or for their boss, they're writing this down.
Like sound bites that you're giving them, maybe.
Sound bites really helps because, just sit on the other side of a pitch. Go to a pitch fest and notice how you react to pitches. Notice when your energy flags. Notice when your eyes drift or mind drifts. Okay, you don't want that to happen. Okay, you want people to be engaged, and you want them to walk away, even if they don't want it, with a clear idea of what the show is, who the characters are, what the tone is, the why of the show. In a way that is soundbitey without being obviously soundbitey, and funny. I mean, that's what I really labor to do. I keep it short, I feel lucky again that I started at a time when, this was before everybody like wanted their fingerprints on your pitch. The first time I pitched, The studio had no idea what I was going to pitch
Oh, wow.
before the first time I pitched it in front of the network. We all walked in together, okay? And I
Wow.
sold that in the room,
Wow.
okay? My first pitch, all right? Because I worked it. I knew where the jokes were. I rehearsed. I don't, look, a lot of people feel different ways about memorizing. I memorize in the way that a stand-up does.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like a conversation.
Right.
I'm going to be ready to riff.
Yeah.
If you interrupt me with a question, that's fine. And
Yeah.
I'm going to have ideas of what you might ask and responses
Yeah.
ready.
That's nice.
But because I've memorized it, I'm not going to lose my place.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'll have the pages there to look at, but some of my confidence comes from knowing what my lines are.
Oh, that's
right?
nice. Yeah.
And so Kevin Beagle, this writer whom I love and worked with on a bunch of shows, he shared a trick with me that I've used, which is like, once I have my pitch in a place where I like it, I record myself doing it. And then when I'm walking the dog or just whenever in the car, I listen to it before that week before I'm pitching. And it just sinks into your brain, right? You're practicing it, but then you're hearing yourself, and passively listening to it too. It gives you an idea of where to adjust your inflections and stuff. And so there's just little performance tricks more than anything. Keeping it short, making sure it's funny. But, again, I benefited from like doing it without a lot of hands so that I knew and I had the confidence of knowing like, I know how to write a pitch in a funny way.
Yeah.
And so had I started with everybody getting into my head about what does and doesn't work, I think it would have fucked up my ability to pitch.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know now, when I get notes, like I have the confidence to say, no, this is going to work. Because that's the other thing doing stand-up or improv does for you is how you are funny.
Yeah.
And nobody else is going to know that. How you could turn a phrase, how you could sell something. Nobody's going to know that by reading it. And so I have some confidence in a couple things like in my bag of tricks that I know I can get a reaction. And that's the other thing I'll say, is any reaction's a good reaction. So yes, a laugh is good, but if somebody feels something, even if it's sadness within a comedy pitch, that's good. They're feeling something. Okay. And so they're engaging with it. Right. And so I try to be attuned to like whenever they're leaning in on anything that I'm saying and make sure that stays in, and if it is something that's a little bit more on the dramatic side, or I, of course, like couch it in jokes on the other side, wrap around with jokes. But, I once remember telling something like in a general about how I wasn't conscious. Like I grew up in the 80s and 90s and I wasn't really that conscious of being like an Indian kid walking around the world, right? We went to primarily white and Latino schools, and I wasn't really conscious of it. I grew up in California, where I grew up, people were really casual about it. But the first time I went to India with my parents was like 10 years old. And I remember when I first stepped off the plane and everybody was Indian. And I mean, I was like, oh, over here, I'm just like a dude. And I remember thinking that as a 10-year-old.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And I was not really aware that there was a little bit of something that what I was carrying in the environment I was in school, even though nobody was necessarily, super racist. I mean, there were some racist people, but like it wasn't like every single day, and I didn't realize that. And I remember saying that in a general, and I looked over at the exec and she looked like she was about to cry.
Wow. Yeah.
Hearing that, and I thought, oh, that's something. There's something there, and that ended up in a pitch that it was a show that got pretty close too, that I did with Heems from Das Racist, but that was something that ended up in my pitch. So like being really tuned in to your stories and what gets reactions.
No, I think that's great, and I think also just in the writing of comedy, I think a misconception that people have is that the story isn't as important as the jokes. And I remember something that you told us that Chris Rock had said about the style of the show is that it's like you don't want to put, he wants jokes put on drama, and that drama being the story. And so for us, when we were in the room, like the focus was like, okay, get the story down. We're all funny people. We can make it funny. Right. Can you talk about that? Like
I can't remember if you said drama or pain, but it was one or the other. It might have even been both or even synonymous in this context. But, joke on joke, funny, but ephemeral, forgettable, you know, but joke on drama, joke on pain, and you have something deeper, you know? And so he really, you know, felt strongly about that. And, you know, I've worked on various shows that approached comedy in this way and might have erred a little bit more on the side of like drama or realism at the expense of joke, you know? And I think we went through kind of a period with a lot of single cams where a smile was enough, you know? But that's not why I got into this you know, like I want to do jokes, you know? And so that was the other reason why this collaboration with Chris really worked, because he wants it to be funny. Yeah. But he doesn't want the jokes to be ephemeral. And whenever we have a subject, he also had that thing like, don't leave meat on the bone, you know?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And so just really explore, you know, and sometimes we didn't have the time given like our total runtime, you know, is getting shorter and shorter with these shows until they're going to be like 2-second shows. It's eventually, you know, but like really try to mine the subject as much as you can, you know, don't leave meat on the bone. But, you know, I generally think, yeah, the story has to work. The story has to dramatically make sense. It has to, for our show in particular, it's not true for all shows, right? But for our show in particular, it has to feel real. And then the jokes are on top of that, you know? I mean, sometimes you have a great joke and you work backwards and like, yeah, sometimes you do that. You fall in love with a joke, right? I'm not going to not put something that's funny in the show because we can't figure out a good dramatic moment. This show, you know, within the language of the show, there's license for that. But you know, it was like even in the pilot, you know, I remember after he read a version of the pilot, the first version of the pilot, he really was like, but what's this really about? What's the thread? And I thought that was already in there, you know? And, you know, I said, well, you know, he's really having to repeat history and that really sucks for him. And he was looking for the simplified thread. And I realized, oh, it's about a kid who really believes he's stupid and how horrible that is for a kid to really think for the majority of this episode, how painful is it to think you are stupid. Here was your shot to get out of your situation, but because you are stupid, you can't do it. And then he discovers, actually, no, I wasn't stupid. I used a number 3 pencil. But that became the dramatic through line that made all of the other jokes stronger. Yeah. Because here, there's a moment where there's a real moment. This child feels like he's stupid. And that's really painful, you know? And yeah, I mean, Chris kind of bullied me into really exploring, you know, that. But, you know, and I'd already gotten halfway there with like, no, you know, he's been bullied. We're establishing how bad it is and that he's got to repeat history and, you know, it's horrible that he has to repeat history, but no, what is this? Why is it bad for this person? What's really deep that's going on with this person? And that ended up being the thread. So, you know, I tried to approach the rest of our stories that way as much as we could.
Yeah. And I think I remember times when we'd be, you know, we get obsessed with a joke and then realize like, oh, the reason why we're having trouble, like, advancing the story is because we need to let this joke go.
Maybe this kid who falls into the sewer doesn't meet a bunch of radioactive turtles that are off-brand TMNT.
So can you talk, so you just had a show come out, it's like week 3, like the last the 6 episodes have aired as we're talking now, like talk about that experience, like what's it like you I know that there's billboards up, like how does that feel, like how are you doing with like any reviews? I know I'm obsessed with hashtags and I like share them with you. How are you feeling about all of it?
I try to, you know, I mean, I'm obsessive about it, of course. Like you want people to like your work. But again, I think stand-up and having done well and also bombed so many times, you know, and then even with my pitching shows, having done well and also having bombed, I try to maintain that, like, okay, that's great, but how can we go further? How can we make this better? You know, what else can I be doing? And some of it is just so I'm not dwelling on it, right? Some of it is just like, it'll make you crazy. If you live in the comments, it makes you crazy. We all do it, you know, but if you live in the comments, it makes you crazy. Like, you know, they did an analysis of the comments, or just on YouTube, they ran the pilot briefly on YouTube for like 2 weeks, and, you know, 4.6 million views, over 7,000 comments. And they did an analysis of the general topics and tone. And 91% positive. The rest
Wow.
was neutral to negative.
That's huge for
And
YouTube.
it's huge, you know,
Yeah.
and people were so nice, and like the topics were really great. And I liked the negative comments because of what I know about how algorithms work. What we all know is anything that generates more commenting is good. But, you know, it's hard not to take some of it personally. Like some people don't like the art, you know,
Right.
as many people who don't like it, there's so many more people who like it. But I really try, and you saw this in the room, because of stand-up, I really think, oh, okay, what are they bumping on? What's the information here?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what
Yeah.
can I do about it?
Yeah.
You know, rather than like be an Eeyore or something or be bummed about it. Like,
Yeah.
well, why do they feel that way? Oh, that's interesting. I also like taking the art, you know, as a, for example, I know how much work we all put into it, and, you know, how many sort of, we were trying to thread the needle so hard with all these different booby traps that were
Yeah.
in the way of like getting it wrong. And I'm glad that we didn't get it wrong in those ways. But yeah, I also know that, like, you know, when we first saw Life in Hell comics, Matt Groening's comic book, and then the interstitials on Tracy Ullman that were the original Simpsons, and the first seasons of the Simpsons show looks very different than today.
Oh, that's
I
true.
also know that in animation and success, if you get multiple seasons, you're iterating on the design. So that's a way to approach it positively. Like, okay, why did they feel this way about X topic? The few haters, like, okay, why did they feel that way? It's free information, right? And so that's the kind of the way that I approach it. It's great to see the billboards. You know, it makes me feel like, okay, they're putting marketing money behind it. But then it's also like, all right, what else can we be doing that is low cost, that might be effective? You know, I mean, even before this started, the first thing I said to you was, I cannot wait to tell you this thing that I'm gonna make Chris Rock do.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, you did say that.
Yeah. I had this idea. I was talking to Matt Claybrooks, one of the writers on this show, who also EP'd Chris's last two specials. And I was talking to him 2 days ago, and we were just riffing on things.
Oh, I love that.
And, you know, I pitched him the idea, and then he pitched something on top of that. And, you know, he came up with another great idea. And so we have these two things that we're like, we cannot wait to like put this in front of Chris, you know, that will be low to no cost for the show, that might have an impression. But I'm really just not trying to think like, okay, this is going to do it, because I know how hard it is to land an audience. And because our show is both on linear and some streaming platforms, and, you know, this unusual situation with the merger at Paramount and this like 6-month delay with it going to Paramount Plus for reasons that are, you know,
it's going to be 6 months
because of the deal that they have with linear.
Oh, okay.
And you can buy it on Amazon, and you can buy it through YouTube. You can season pass it. But, you know, we're in a complicated situation.
Yeah.
But we knew that going in, you know, so the linear numbers still matter. And so that's why I'm just not resting on it. Like I'm enjoying, I feel really redeemed about some of the decisions that like I wasn't sure about. Like Chris and I agreed on most things, and we had a couple disagreements that were creative disagreements, but he trusted me, which I give him a lot of credit for. And, you know, some of those things like really worked out. And some of the things that he pitched like really worked out that I was not into, and like they really worked out. So it's great to get that confirmation, and it's great to have the data of those comments. The 91% positive stuff really helps us in a variety of ways, the positive stuff too, in trying to get another season of the show. And so, you know, I've worked with so many people like Bill who just like, they don't rest. Like, okay, how does this get us to the next step?
Nice.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And thank you, Sanjay, for sharing the experience and all of your advice. It's going to be helpful for like listeners. It's definitely helpful for me. So thank you for your mentorship and your like just continued greatness.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad I paid you to say all of that. So.
Cool.
Old joke, but you know.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Third and Fairfax. You can listen and subscribe to Third and Fairfax on Spotify, Apple, and Libsyn, and watch us on the Writers Guild of America West's YouTube channel. If you like this episode or have a comment, email us at podcast@wga.org. Also check out writtenby.com, the Guild's online publication, for more on writer craft, career, and union life. And see you next time.